On August 20th, 1989, one of the most famous murder cases in American history took place. In Beverly Hills, where crimes normally don't occur, two wealthy parents, Jose Menendez, an extremely powerful businessman in the entertainment industry, and Kitty Menendez, a wholesome stay-at-home mother, had 14 rounds of shotgun ammo deposited into them, blowing the dad's head off, nearly decapitating him, and causing the mother to slip in her own pool of blood while trying to escape until someone fired two last bullets into her face to finish her off. By the time the cops arrived, the two sons of the wealthy parents were rolling on the ground in the fetal position, cursing at the heavens that someone killed their parents in this chilling, very public phone call. Their alibi was that they went to see the movie Batman, and they would have gotten away with it too if the younger of the two, Eric Menendez, didn't let his guilt get the best of him and confess to his flimsy therapist that it was them who killed their own parents. After a Netflix series dubbing Eric and Lyle Menendez monsters came out, suddenly the world wants them free again. They want them let out of jail, done with their life sentence, and back on the streets. And that is because all the shocking, terrible evidence of a lifetime of sexual abuse that I'm about to show you to prove that Jose Menendez is a monster, and some people maybe do deserve to get murdered, and maybe not all murderers belong in jail. You're really gonna be shocked by all the evidence that came out back in the day and the brand new evidence that came out this year. That is why Eric and Lyle Menendez are about to be resentenced and sent to a parole hearing, which could potentially let them out of jail after 35 years. But before we get into all that, make sure to subscribe. I am the professor here at Pop Culture University, Professor Patty, where you learn everything going on in the world of true crime, law, order, pop culture, and just everything. And the biggest story of the week, including a lot of celebrities like Kim Kardashian, Patti LuPone, Rosie O'Donnell, Reba McEntire, they all want the Menendez brothers freed. But why? How do these two murderers who have confessed to their crime deserve to walk the streets? So back in the 1990s, Eric and Lyle Menendez, they were a pop culture phenomenon. It was spread over every single angle of the media. They became a phenomenon, with a lot of people thinking that they're just these affluent, greedy, spoiled brat of sons who think they're so above everyone and spit down on the commoners and are offended that they're even brought to court over this crime because they're just entitled to do whatever they want, including killing their parents, and they should just be given their $15 million and go on with their lives. Whereas other half thought that they were actually victims of their dad's abuse for their whole life and believed them when they heard their heartbreaking testimony. And a lot of people thought they were hot. And they have had fan bases since the 90s, only really shooting into popularity today on TikTok, with a lot of people, maybe including myself, wanting them to be freed. So back in the day, the prosecution had a pretty open and shut case. Like, this should have been a layup for them. You have a confession, you have a ton of evidence of a motive for these kids, as they claimed that the dad was about to change his final contestment in the will, or whatever it's called, like, I don't know, but he was about to change his will. They claim that the sons are motivated by greed, and that they even had some computer hacker come over to their house and wipe a recent history on their computer of them trying to make sure the version of the will that they want shown is the one that is shown in the computer. And they claim that basically it was just affluenza that got the best of them, and that's why they carried out the murder. They showed pictures of the crime scene, very gruesome photos that really hit hard at the jurors. They showed Lyle Menendez's story that he wrote in school one time about a kid murdering his parents for the money and getting away with it. They showed a lot of interesting pieces of evidence as to why they should simply send these two sociopaths, who were just coincidentally both born to the same family, did this crime. But you know how unlikely it would be for two sociopaths to be born to the same parents? Pretty unlikely. But have you ever seen a murder case focused on why rather than who? Because that's where this case really took a huge turn. Because the defense and the iconic defense attorney, Leslie Abramson, had another thing up her sleeve: the truth. She had the truth that was about to come for all the jurors, and the prosecution really honed in on the male jurors to get the guilty verdict, but Leslie Abramson knew that with the truth, she could free these brothers, because the truth of the matter is that Jose Menendez had been abusing them since they were old enough to walk and old enough to do what he wanted, if you know what I'm saying. Leslie claims that they didn't kill their parents. They killed their abusers, torturers, oppressors, and captors. And there's so much evidence for this, but basically, in summation, Eric and Lyle Menendez claim that they were 18 and 21 years old. They didn't escape their father's grasp already, then they were never going to, and they had to take matters into their own hands. Eric and Lyle Menendez suffered a lot of abuse at the hands of their dad, saying that he would sexually abuse them, physically abuse them, and mentally abuse them since the time they were born, doing things like sodomizing them, forcing them to perform oral sex on them, taking showers with them, making sure they were getting HIV tested because that was going around at the time, and the dad didn't want to catch that. And the mother was apparently covering everything up. She knew it was happening. She would even perform oral inspections and genital inspections on the boys to make sure they weren't spreading STDs to their dad. She would even make sure any guests who were in the house didn't go down a certain hallway so they wouldn't hear what was going on between the dad and the sons behind closed doors. She was very complicit in all of it, and that's why, by association, they wanted to kill her as well. Their own testimonies are probably the most heartbreaking thing in this defense, because they claim that they've never talked about this with each other until they were on the stand. Their first account of their abuse, how they were so young and they didn't know that their dad sexually abusing them wasn't normal, and how they would have almost like elementary super juvenile words for what their dad would do to them to try to make sense of it back then. Like when their dad would go full on and completely assault them, they would call that rough sex. And whenever their dad wanted that, it was like the worst day of their life, and they always lived in fear of it happening.
He would put me on my knees, and he would guide me, all my movements, and I would have oral sex with him.
Did you want to do this? What do you believe was the originating cause of you and your brother ultimately winding up shooting your parents?
Me telling.
You telling what?
Me telling Lyle that,
Was it you telling Lyle about something that was happening?
My dad.
Can you answer the question?
yes,
Okay, it was you telling Lyle what?
that my dad had been molesting me.
The second strongest piece of evidence, which I find the most compelling, is that they had a lot of family members take their side. You think Jose Menendez and Katie Menendez, the victims of the murder, would be the one with the mass majority of the family on their side, but that was not the case. Nowadays, 24 members of the Menendez family want the Menendez brothers freed, and they always have. They were even just on ABC News talking about how relieved that they're about to be resentenced. Hopefully, I'm making this video in hope that it can contribute to them getting resentenced, but how relieved they are that they're finally going to get out and no longer face the consequences of their awful childhood. Katie Menendez's sister even said that she forgives her nephews for what they did to her sister. Jose Menendez, the dad, his mom said that she always believed the boys, but the prosecution, their main defense was that Jose Menendez was just not that kind of person. He would never do that, and that all became shattered when new evidence came out that there's actually a third victim of Jose Menendez, which follows the exact type of boy at the time he would do this to, the exact archetype, and that was a boy band member, Roy Roseo, that he actually managed in the entertainment industry. He was in the boy band Menudo. I was not aware of this boy band, but they were very, very large in Mexico and even in America back in the day. Jose Menendez was very successful at his job, but he definitely was taking advantage of people he was giving opportunities to. And Roy Roseo said that he fully sodomized him 3 times while he was 15 and 16 years old, 2 times after, right after their concerts at Madison Square Garden. Maybe that got him excited and wanted to pounce on him then. But Roy said that Jose would invite him over alone, apart from the rest of the boys in the boy band, give him a drink that was roofied with something else, give him some wine, stir it up. When he'd woke up, he was in so much pain he could barely even walk. The Menendez's cousin Andy said that Eric Menendez confided in him over and over again when they were young, and even asked Andy if it's normal that his dad was doing this to him. The dad, Jose, told Eric and Lyle that if they ever tell anyone, something very, very bad will happen to them. That was like the kiddish words he would use to them back in the day, but as they grew up, became preteens and teenagers, he said, if you tell anyone blatantly, I will kill you.
Well, he told me his father was massaging his dick.
Their cousin Diane even said that Lyle confided in her about the abuse that they were suffering. and said that their dad had been touching him for a few years at this point and didn't know if it was normal either. Now, a lot of you may be thinking, okay, you don't have to kill your parents if they're doing that. You should just run. You should escape. You know, if your life is on the line, you probably suddenly won't care about the money. That won't be your priority anymore. It'll be survival. But a lot of people don't know that, yes, they were college-age men. They could go off to college and escape it. They could buy a car and escape it. Jose Menendez was so powerful, so well-connected. He promised them that if anyone found out, he would kill them. He forced them to go to UCLA down the street from where they lived so they could come home all the time, like any afternoon, and keep doing with their dad what he wanted to. Even though Lyle and Eric both wanted to go to colleges many states away, he just fully had a grasp on them that they would never be free from. More evidence that has come out since then and back in the day includes photos of Eric and Lyle naked when they're about 6 and 8 years old. And the prosecution was so just like far-fetched when they were trying to explain why there was a bunch of naked photos of them as a kid. And they were like, well, the kids took them. All boys, young boys take photos of themselves. No, they don't. That's weird, especially from the angles that they're from. And the mom's handwriting was on the envelope with the photos in them. So she knew what was in there. She was storing them. Why? That's weird. That's odd. Insanity. Something really, really sad is that the doctor who was Eric's pediatrician remembers Eric Menendez coming in for a lot of frequent checkups, a lot of frequent visits to the doctor with wounds that would align with someone who's being sexually abused, especially orally. The doctor was asked in the past about the symptoms he would see Eric with, and he said both sets of medical records listed symptoms that are usually present in cases of child sexual abuse, including gastrointestinal problems, unexplained abdominal pain, enuresis, frequent headaches, speech articulation disorder, telogen effluvium, teeth grinding, sores in the mouth, cuts in the throat, and unexplained sores along the gums. He said, from his own words, from a doctor, yes, these are all in line with someone who's being abused, especially a child who can do nothing about it.
That consistent with, could that be caused by child sexual abuse, in your opinion?
Yes, could be.
And what, do you have any opinion as to what type of child sexual abuse could have resulted in that particular complaint?
Oral copulation.
Despite all of that evidence, the jury went into a deadlock because the prosecution really appealed to the male jurors. Back in 1990s, when this went to the trial, a lot of men didn't believe that young boys or other men could be abused, or as Lyle Menendez said himself, there was a culture of silence back then. The women were all too familiar with in the trial, and that's why they gave them the manslaughter verdict instead of the completely guilty of first-degree murder verdict. I commend them for that, and I can only sympathize with women who probably live every day hoping something like that doesn't happen to them. But the men in the trial, they probably don't think that in their everyday lives. They don't even think that's a possibility that can happen. Lyle, in a recent podcast episode that he did from jail, he was saying that he thinks the culture of silence started to wash away and erode in the 2000s, and as the decades he's been in jail continue, have washed away even more and more, and hopefully is gone now. So after their deadlock trial, the first trial, a few years later they were given a second trial, already spending 7 years in jail just waiting to get the verdict. And the second trial, the judge really wanted to get a victory for the Los Angeles court system because O.J. Simpson was just acquitted on all charges, given the innocent verdict, even though he obviously murdered his wife, Nicole Brown Simpson. So they took away what they would call the abuse excuse, and they were not allowed to mention any motive that stemmed from the abuse of their father. They weren't allowed to say that's the origin of our crime, why we committed it, why we had to commit it, why it was self-defense. The abuse excuse, that just shows how toxic the culture was back then and how just they would erase sexual assault survivors, how much they would oppress sexual assault victims. They called it an abuse excuse. Like, what a fucking boys club of people just trying to silence others and enable each other. So after the end of the second trial, they really weren't allowed to explain their motive or explain why it was self-defense. The jurors were only given 2 options by the judge of the verdict they can give them. That was fully guilty of first-degree murder or innocent. So clearly, if you have 2 options, are not given any backstory of why they did it, and you have a confession, 2 + 2 is 4, 5 + 5 is 10, you're gonna give them the guilty verdict. So they were given lifetime in prison without the possibility of parole, basically ensuring that they would rot and die behind bars. And both the boys said that they were so in shock when they were given that verdict, that they were just completely stunned. They were speechless. The daunting barrel of a gun that's in your face when you are given a life sentence, even though you're a victim, must be very shocking. So a lot of the jurors in the second trial said that if they would have known about the abuse that they faced, they would have never given them that verdict. They would have given them the innocent verdict, but they were not allowed to hear that. Students, that's what's called an obstruction of justice. Now 35 years later, they're finally potentially going to be given a new verdict because of new evidence that has come out. I'm so passionate about this case just because I saw a Lifetime movie about it like 7 years ago, and that's where I got into it, and I've kind of been like silently keeping up with them ever since. And when Ryan Murphy decided to put out the show, I was so happy that everyone was talking about it and everyone was so into it and emboldened to try to add to the movement on TikTok. So this is me just adding to the movement. Anyway, more evidence has come out, and I already mentioned 24 Menendez family members has signed a petition saying that they want the Menendez brothers free because they know Jose Menendez is that kind of person and they know what they've been through. Their cousin Al and a lot of their other cousins like Diane and Andy said that anytime they would visit the house, the dad would summon Eric to a shower, to a room, and Kitty Menendez would not let the guest go and see or hear what was going on there. So they knew something was up.
I believed him. Because of the noises I heard coming out of the room, the fact that Kitty would not allow me to go down the hallway to find out what was going on, how I wasn't allowed to see the boys right after they came out of the bedroom. You know what? That son of a bitch was actually doing what they say he was doing back in that bedroom.
Any rules about what you could do when one of the boys was sent down the hall and Jose went into the room with them?
You couldn't go down there. I mean, you stayed in the living room or you did something else, but you didn't go anywhere near the hallway.
All the family, including other aunts, uncles, cousins, moms, dads of Kitty and Jose, they all believe the boys. They want them to be free, and they want them free before Thanksgiving, which I'm gonna get to that if they will be.
My sister could have protected her kids. That was her job.
Do you forgive Lyle and Eric Menendez for what they did?
Yes.
I think the nail in the coffin of this was the third victim coming forward, as well as a letter that was unearthed after Cousin Andy tragically died. If you remember, Cousin Andy is the one who was around their age who Eric confided in. A letter was unearthed that Eric wrote to Andy in 1988, a year before the murders happened. And in that letter, he expressed to Andy a lot of desperation, begging and pleading that he didn't know what to do about his dad continuing to touch him because he never knew what was going to happen and it hurts so much and he's threatening to kill me and he's so insane. So I'm gonna read you part of the note. It says, "I've been trying to avoid Dad. It's still happening, Andy, but it's worse for me. I never know when it's going to happen and it's driving me crazy. Every night I stay up thinking he might want to come in. I need to put it out of my mind. I know what you said before, but I'm afraid. You just don't know Dad like I do. He's crazy. He warned me 100 times about telling anyone." That sounds like a threat to me. That sounds like you have to act out of self-defense to me. That sounds like imperfect self-defense, and that sounds like manslaughter to me. So I would give them the clemency. A tragic detail about this that I think goes unnoticed by most people is that Andy was 15 when his cousins, Eric and Lyle, were taken into jail, and he was spiraling into depression ever since. He apparently lived a very sad life, and he just seemed to be haunted by something. He tragically passed away in 2003 at 30 years old. At that point, the brothers were already in jail for about 15 years. So when he was 30 years old, he passed away due to an overdose of sleeping pills. He unalived himself, and his mother told reporters that she believes her son's feeling of guilt and about the inability to handle his cousin's incarceration led to his death. So thankfully, a resentencing is in the conversation. It never has been, ever. The Menendez family said that they were waiting for this day. They're so excited that this is finally happening. And after all the time that they've already wasted in jail, this is just a consolation for everything that they've already been through. And they never thought it would really happen. Lyle even saying the thought of being free makes him happy, but he doesn't want to think about it because hope is a very dangerous thing, especially when the situation seems hopeless, especially when you're gridlocked in a system that does not believe you and doesn't believe male victims. He's been hopeless for 30 years, maybe with a shrivel of hope, but he doesn't want to get himself too excited. But I think now gives him permission to be a little bit excited because the Los Angeles County District Attorney, who's like the most powerful attorney in all of Los Angeles, that's like the top, tippity-top position, George Gascon, said that he's unveiled his long-awaited decision in the infamous case And he said that the brothers have paid their debts to society and that they were subjected to a large amount of dysfunction in the home and molestation, and under the law, resentencing is appropriate. The petition that George Gascon filed asked the court to resentence the men to 50 years to life on 2 counts of first-degree murder. Under that law, they would be eligible for youth parole since they were both under the age of 26 at the time of the crime, and they've already served 30 years, so they wouldn't have to serve their full 50. They would get a shorter sentence, and that would make them eligible for parole right now. And say what you want about Kim Kardashian, but she makes a lot of sense when she talks about these cases. She works very close with Ryan Murphy. Also, I mean, say you want about Ryan Murphy, they can both be super problematic, and I'm not saying they're perfect, but them combined bringing attention to this case, and Kim Kardashian even suggesting the youthful parole for them to get out earlier and for them to receive clemency, has literally changed their lives. And I bet you Kim and Ryan would be one of the first people they hug if they got out. She's been talking about it on red carpets, on her Instagram, and when the district attorney said he has submitted a resentencing petition, she was like, thank you for your belief in fairness and belief in justice being served. It's really crazy. So now that the district attorney's office has filed the petition, it will go to a judge. If the judge sides with the defense and the district attorney, a parole board will evaluate the brothers and see if they have been rehabilitated and are safe to re-enter society. Imagine like standing before people and they have to determine if you're safe to re-enter society. Both gotten multiple college degrees. They've both done humanitarian work and like social service, emotional support work, where Eric runs like a self-help group and Lyle works with like a support group of sexual assault victims. So it seems like they're rehabilitated and pretty stand-up guys. So I don't know. What they're thinking is that they could get clemency before Thanksgiving, but more likely, like if the case is rushed because of just the heat on the case and the public outcry wanting to give them a second chance at life, I think that's very unlikely. The family wants them out for the holidays. It's the least they can do. But most likely in 6 months, a parole board will set them free. So if you want them to be set free, you should share this video, like it, comment. Let's keep them Free the Menendez Brothers movement moving. Hashtag Free the Menendi. And I support them and I love the show. So thank you guys for watching. Subscribe to the channel, become a student here at Pop Culture University. It's a PhD level course, very rigorous. So make sure you tune in for the next lesson, and I love you guys, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.